before we get things underway, I want to send out my prayers to New Zealand and the city of Christchurch after the horrific terrorist attack that occurred in 2 mosques yesterday. At the time of this recording, there are 49 confirmed deaths, which is very scary. With that being said, though, let's actually move on to today's topic. I actually wanted to make this kind of video because you guys know I did this kind of thing for Evan Bouchard last year, and in a way, I kind of did it for Noah Dobson too. I made a video on why I wouldn't really want the Canucks to draft Dobson, and now we're coming up to this year's draft, and there are different opinions and different players that I have my own thoughts about, so let's talk about Arthur Kaliyev once again. I made a video about Kaliyev back in October, and that was very, very positive, I will say here. That video, in my opinion, was not necessarily covering all sides of the Kaliyev story. And what I mean by that is the fact that Kaliyev is so good on the score sheet, yet how he is so far down in all of these draft rankings. If you take a look at it, Arthur Kaliyev this season, 101 points in 66 games played, 50 goals, 51 assists, 101 points, 1.53 points per game. He is doing absolutely incredibly well right now. And if you take a look at the OHL in its entirety, playing for the Hamilton Bulldogs, Arthur Kaliyev is all the way up there at 7th in the league in points with his 101. Kaliyev is doing amazingly well, and among U18 players, he's first in all those categories. It makes a lot of sense to see why. He's got the best shot in the draft, and he's so good at just standing there in the Elias Pettersson spot, having the puck fed over to him, and he's just so good at one-timing it in. It goes in virtually every single time. His shot is amazing. It's the best of the draft, and in my opinion, he's not the best scorer of the draft. That's Cole Caulfield, but the best shot in the draft, for sure, belongs to Arthur Kaliyev. And I think I kind of want to make that distinction a little bit first. In my Cole Caulfield video, I said he was the best goal scorer in the draft, but in this video here, I'm saying that Kaliyev has the best shot. They're not the same thing. Being the best goal scorer does not necessarily mean you have the best shot. A goal scorer encompasses everything. Driving the net, finding those passing lanes, getting open, having a good shot, and having good scoring positions as well. Having a good shot just means having a good shot. And Caulfield is the better scorer in my opinion. Kaliyev just has the best shot. Now going forward, Kaliyev has been so good. If you take a look at some of these U18 records over the past few years of OHL players, let's take a look at U18 OHL goals from 2008 up until now. Kaliyev is 3rd. He's tied with Jeff Skinner, he's above Nail Yakupov, Tyler Seguin, Dylan Strome, Nick Suzuki. Only DeBrincat and Stamkos have more OHL goals at their U18 years than Kaliyev. Looking at the total points, let's take a look at that. Kaliyev is 9th. He's ahead of guys like Nail Yakupov, who went 1st overall. He's ahead of Nick Suzuki, who was a top 10 pick. He's ahead of Michael Del Cole, who was a top 10 pick. He's ahead of Sam Bennett, who was a top 10 pick. He was ahead of Taylor Hall. He was ahead of all of these guys. Taking a look at points per game as well, Kaliyev is 14th. He was tied with DeBrincat, which DeBrincat, it doesn't really work here in this comparison. DeBrincat was small and he had a bad first step, which is why he went later in the draft. But look at the guys that Kaliyev has a higher points per game than. Nick Suzuki, Taylor Hall, Michael Del Cole, Jeff Skinner, Matt Duchene, Max Domi. He's had a better draft year than all of these guys. So why is it that looking at Arthur Kaliyev's rankings, he's ranked 28th by future considerations. He's ranked 31st by ISS Hockey. He's ranked 17th by McKean's Hockey. TSN and Bob McKenzie has him as 13th. And he's here in a higher echelon of numbers as all of these top 10 picks. Well, in order to look at that, let's go back to my first Kaliyev video that I made back in October and take a look at NHL Draft Central Andy LaHoo's comment here. It's one of the highest rated comments, and it's so good in laying everything out. Interesting. While talking with some scouts, it appears to me that Kaliyev's draft stock is falling. His competitiveness is really bad, and he relies too much on others to create scoring chances. He is one of, if not the, best shot of the draft, but there is some question marks about that goal-scoring ability translating to the NHL. He has some skills, but his involvement in the play is very low. His defensive game is also questionable. He will need to work on those aspects before I can rank him as a top prospect. He's a bit like the Merkley of the 2019 draft. If you remember about Ryan Merkley, he was amazing. Fantastic talent, fantastic tool set, fantastic on-ice abilities, but his personality was really bad, and as a result, he dropped really far. Looking at Arthur Kaliyev, we can see a little bit of the same thing with Evan Bouchard from last year, if I had to pinpoint it right down. Bouchard was a guy who I didn't like because, looking at his defensive game, he was kind of lazy in his own zone, he didn't backcheck well, his mind wasn't really in the game when he was in his own zone. Same thing could be said about Kaliyev here. Kaliyev has amazing offensive production because he's so good at hammering the puck, but everywhere else he's kind of got that, let's just say, cruise control going on here. Kaliyev doesn't necessarily have the best work ethic, nor the best competitiveness in areas of the ice that aren't the offensive zone. Now, there are a few other, let's just say, perspectives that combat this. Let's take a look at TPE Hockey and what he has to say about Arthur Kaliyev. This is from a few days ago. Tonight, top prospect Kaliyev hit 100 points in the OHL, the first U18 player to do so since Strome, McDavid, Marner, and DeBrincat in 2015. Kaliyev is a top 12 player for me, but falls in the late first for many due to perceived one-dimensional play. In my opinion, if a player can put the puck in the net, then I don't care about one-dimensional play. Scoring is rare. If a guy can get it done, then a team can hammer out the other issues. He's top 12 now, but he's moving up. And that for sure is an interesting perspective too. Who cares if the guy's one-dimensional? If he can score, that is the most valuable asset here. But in my opinion, coming from a Vancouver Canucks fan, we've seen how effort can somewhat determine how good a player becomes. We saw this with Nikolai Goldolbin. We saw this with Alex Burmistrov. We saw this with a whole bunch of guys throughout the past few years, and in my opinion, having a guy like Kaliyev who's got this amazing skill set of tools, but just not the craftsman to actually use them in the best way possible, it's kind of a red flag for me, which is why I wouldn't really want to take Kaliyev, especially in the position where we are now, where the Canucks are probably going to draft 6 to 9, if not 1, 2, or 3. Speaking about that though, I actually asked a few people around Twitter, and the general consensus that I received was, if Kaliyev was as good defensively as Peyton Krebs, and if Kaliyev had the same engine that Peyton Krebs had, he would be the third best forward in the draft. He would be top 3, top 4 maybe. And that's just kind of a testament to how talented Kaliyev is, and in terms of how good his numbers are. But the fact is, he's just not that good everywhere else, which is why he's dropped, and which is why, despite being the best U18 player since Dylan Strome and Connor McDavid and Mitch Marner, it's why he's ranked in the very late first by a lot of people. Going at it again, 28th by future considerations. He's ranked in the bottom half of the first round by many of these scouting parties, and it's because of these work-related issues. In my personal rankings, I have Kaliyev around 15-ish. I wouldn't take him higher than that because I think that in terms of a talent perspective, he certainly does deserve to go high, but everything else as a hockey player brings him kinda down. Now, that's not to say that Kaliyev is not going to be good. I mean, we saw Evan Bouchard earlier at the beginning of the year. He got himself a goal in the NHL. I think that Kaliyev is probably going to have some good NHL moments, but it wouldn't surprise me if he didn't turn into a Richard candidate player year after year like he could. Because to me, he's got all the talents to do so, it's just that we don't know how well it's going to translate. Which is why I'm concerned about Arthur Kaliyev, nor do I want the Vancouver Canucks to draft him. Despite what I said in my earlier video in October, which was all positive and it took a look at all of the really good things he's got, I don't want it. And I know everything that I said in that October video was true. He's really good at scoring. He's got a great offensive mind. 100 points in 65 games is not a feat that could be replicated easily at all. But in my video in October, I didn't talk about any of the bad stuff, which is why I'm doing that here. Arthur Kaliyev has the best shot of the draft, but I would be okay with passing on him. Now, just to end things off here, that doesn't mean that I hate Kaliyev, it doesn't mean I don't want him to succeed, no, it just means that I'm concerned about him. I hope he has a great NHL career, I hope he proves me wrong. But other than that, I would prefer for the Vancouver Canucks to not take him. Hope you guys enjoyed. This was your Plus and Gaming, and bye.